Welcome back to Switch Stars, my name's Luke and welcome to a brand new year. And what better way to kick things off than by taking a look back at the worst games I played in 2022, which with a limited amount of hours in the day, unfortunately I wasn't able to cover all of them, but by God were there a lot of them. 2022 saw the rise of the scammers though, and by that I mean Midnight Works and the Triforce of bullshit, so I could easily fill up the entire list with their titles. But today we're going to keep things a little more varied than that, sift through the shite and lock in the worst of the worst, as I count down my top worst Switch games of 2022. So sit back and give that like button a tickle, subscribe for more Switch content, and let's get cracking. So for all of the games featured in today's list, you can check out my full reviews of them, linked down in the description box below, but we're kicking things off with The Dead Tree of Ranchiuna, a walking simulator which takes the walking element of the genre to the extreme, with the game being about 85% walking, 5% puzzle and 10% story. This one not only has some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard in a game, the story itself is absolutely shocking and not in a good way. Basically though, you play as some dude who has returned to his hometown after being away at university, only to find it abandoned, and whilst there he experiences a series of visions explaining what happened whilst he was away. But what it essentially boils down to is that some other dude's childhood friends played mean tricks on him, made his girlfriend hate him, and eventually stabbed him to death and hung him from the village tree. And get this, all of this happened because he stole a toy from one of the other lads when he was a child. Like I said, absolutely shocking and completely nonsensical, and so you're just basically left with the walking element, which, aside from having one semi-interesting moment where you have to balance across some beams in a cave, is ultimately a 2-hour slog through generic looking landscapes. All in all, pretty exhausting stuff and definitely not worth the time or effort. Up next we have Pandemic Shooter, a game which despite being somewhat stylish in its appearance, really fails to deliver when it comes to the gameplay. Now the story with this one isn't all that bad to be honest, it's even slightly humorous at times, and it centres around a zombie outbreak and the speculation and conspiracy theories around the causes of it, but there's some pretty decent voice acting and some relatively entertaining theories bandied about. You play as a crack team of exterminators sent out to investigate though, and the game has you working through levels, eliminating zombies as you go using various weapons and power-ups, and fighting big zombie bosses, but the big issue here is that it's all just far too repetitive. While the environments change slightly from level to level, the gameplay itself remains the same throughout. A monotonous and linear slog through waves of generic zombies, with the same bullet sponge boss finales to look forward to at the end of each of them. And unfortunately, the storyline and dialogue just isn't enough to save this one from being just another generic Switch zombie game. Sticking with the zombie theme then, up next we have Haunted Zombie School, a game which markets itself as having a movie-like story and sees students attempting to escape from a zombie-filled school, kind of like the Netflix series All of Us Are Dead. But unlike that smash hit, this one is a smash shit, and its gameplay will have you regretting you even installed the damn thing. Taking place over the course of several days though, Haunted Zombie School has you embarking on expeditions from the safety of your classroom to classic school locations such as the cafeteria, library and medical bay, on the hunt for supplies and inevitably a way out. But the execution of this one has had no thought put into it whatsoever. The storyline is disjointed and nonsensical. You'll find assault rifles, heavy machine guns and grenades just lying about in classrooms as though the school has its own on-site armoury, and the AI of both the zombies and your accompanying partner is absolutely horrendous, with the zombies popping up out the ground like jack-in-the-boxes, and your wingman or wing lady flip-flopping between being completely incompetent and barely able to walk down a set of stairs, to transforming into fucking John Rambo and mowing down every zombie in sight. A complete disaster of a game, this one, but surprisingly still not as bad as some of the rest of the games in today's list. So I'm a big fan of the Soulsborne games, and when I saw Soulsland I thought, hey, here might be a budget Souls-like title for me to enjoy. But then I realised it was from the same creator as Gangster Magic and Lawnmower Mortal Race, and knew I was probably destined for disappointment. Created using a Souls-like Unity template, Soulsland drops you into a series of increasingly obscure environments and tasks you with fumbling your way to an exit portal, along the way killing a selection of generic enemies and partaking in boss fights with an utterly unmemorable demon dude. But the main issue with the game is that more often than not you don't actually need to beat the boss and can just make a beeline straight for the portals, and the souls which you obtain from killing enemies actually serve no purpose whatsoever. So in short, your entire gameplay experience with Soulsland is unrewarding and altogether completely meaningless. Definitely one to skip in my opinion though. Now, while many eShop scammers out there at least put effort in when it comes to creating embellished descriptions, for Dead Invaders Modern War 3D, developer T-Bull hasn't even bothered with that and instead gives us a brief selection of gameplay features which, true to his name, are complete and utter T-bullshit. Contrary to the game's eShop description, there are in fact no stunning boss fights, you will not be fighting dramatic battles against space invaders, and you won't need to save your ammo, as the game essentially sees you tethered to the spot, slowly and effortlessly destroying wave after wave of giant bug-like creatures, with the only thing setting levels apart being a few different environments, and the only challenge actually being its awfully slow sensitivity. What little there is in the way of gameplay variety comes in the form of either single or dual wielding of machine guns, or alternatively an endless survival mode which you'll probably get bored of after about the second or third wave, as there are about 3 different bugs for you to kill and they often get stuck on one another, further reducing the difficulty. Do yourself a favour though and avoid this one at all costs. So heading into the halfway point then, we have another game from Tero Lunker, and while Soulsland was admittedly an utter disappointment, it doesn't hold a candle to Cyborg Invasion Shooter 3, Saviour of the World. Now you may at this point be wondering what happened to the first 2 Cyborg Invasion Shooter games. Well, those ones are thankfully confined to the realm of the PC Master Race and the treasure trove of shite which is the Steam eShop. But this third entry in the series somehow made it to the Switch, and by God I wish it hadn't. Much like Soulsland though, your objective in this one is simple. Work your way to an exit portal to complete the levels, killing baddies along the way using a variety of different ranged weapons instead of melee, and once again you have boss encounters which can be skipped entirely. But the levels are even more uninventive this time round, and the weapons themselves are complete shite, so more often than not you'll just be opting to head directly for that exit portal. In addition to this, the game's frame rate absolutely shits itself whenever the action gets a little too heavy, so all in all, a waste of your time and mine, and a regrettable purchase if I ever did see one. Now our next game is one that's so bad it barely even constitutes as a game, but I felt that I better include it in this list as, alongside Funny Truck, another shitbrick that the developers released at the same time, the duo are amongst the most low effort titles I think I've ever played on the Switch. It was a tough call, but of the 2, Disco Cannon Airlines is probably the worst, and it basically has you launching a ragdoll character up into the air and then bouncing off mattresses, cows, planes and God knows what else in an attempt to score points and reach as high a height as possible. But the controls in the game are absolutely screwed, there's no consistency to your height gains, and the points you earn are never actually recorded, so it's a complete waste of time. Like I said, its brethren, Funny Truck, is almost equally as bad, and both are on sale constantly for about $1. But if you ever happen to spot it on the eShop, I highly advise you take a wide berth and spend your cash elsewhere. So the Destruction Derby games are amongst my favourite titles on the PS1, and Demolish Derby, Nitro Battle Driving Car Games 2022 Deluxe Driver, which as you'd expect is a Midnight Works title, once again attempts to sucker in fans of the originals with its fake screenshots and utter bollocks spouting description. As expected though, the gameplay in this one no way reflects expectations, and instead of smashing up your vehicle or turning other vehicles into pies, each and every one of the game's 20 or so levels has you driving through the desert, hitting checkpoints or careering off cliff faces, and when you do get an opportunity to destroy other vehicles, the game reprimands you and states you loose. The game's race mode is again a gauntlet of checkpoints which, thanks to the god-awful physics, are near impossible to complete. So all in all, it's not only one of the worst driving games on the Switch, it's also one of the worst Destruction Derby clones ever to exist, featuring no destruction and no derbies. Utter shite. Now, World War Battle Heroes Field Armies Call of Prison Duty Simulator, that's our next game's title, comes to us from VG Games, the Midnight Works in Disguise publisher. Advertised as a World War shooter with no clear definition of exactly which World War, the game has you playing as a general and the best soldier of the army, who has been sent out to the front line to achieve victory, and you'll do this by destroying enemy fuel tanks, artillery outposts and assassinating enemy generals. Sounds like a hoot. Aside from the fact that the game only has 5 levels, one big issue is that the levels themselves are ridiculously large, so combat is scarce and about 90% of your time is spent walking, and even when you do happen to get into scuffles, the enemy AI is so tragically bad that so long as you're moving you'll barely take a hit. In addition to this, the game's lock-on system, which the eShop describes as being for the most insane players in the game, is more or less an aimbot which allows you to effortlessly mow down the opposition without so much as a cursory glance at them. But even if you choose not to utilise this feature, these encounters are about as half-baked as the rest of the game, weapons feel underpowered, and the stock death animation is just the icing on the cake. A terrible World War shooter and a terrible game in general. So for our finale we have a game which I've yet to put my review out for, but this is one which has actually taken me several sittings to gather footage for, simply due to how soul-destroyingly dull the game is, and like our previous title, this one comes to us from VG Games. Monster Impossible Truck No Limit Adventure Drive Simulator Sport 3D is a game which quite simply epitomises the developer's overall lack of effort, creativeness and commitment when it comes to their actual interest in video games, and it highlights more than any of the previous releases how little they care about both the industry and the players themselves. As always though, we get a selection of the finest fake screenshots for this and ample amounts of bullshittery in the description, but the game itself is far worse than you could ever imagine. To sum it up though, imagine playing through 80 GTA 5 sky tracks which have been thrown together by a 5-year-old, many of which are repeated multiple times and include countless numbers of winding and featureless tracks which take about 5 minutes to complete, and on top of it all you're doing it in an underpowered monster truck which can barely drive up hills or steer round corners. Not only that, some of the levels can actually be completed with certain trucks, so then you have to return and grind out previous levels just to earn enough cash to buy an upgrade. Honestly though, I know I've joked about these kind of games wearing me down before, but this one almost broke me, and if you've got any sense whatsoever, you'll avoid this one like the plague. And with that, we come to the end of my list of the worst Switch games I played in 2022. So did you get to experience any of these delightfully dreadful titles? Or perhaps you played something worse? As always, let me know down in the comments section below. Hopefully though, I was able to help you dodge this shower of shite, and I plan on continuing my efforts throughout 2023. So feel free to show your appreciation and drop a like, subscribe for more coverage of the trashiest of trash from the bowels of the Switch eShop, and until next time, as always, thanks once again for watching, take care of yourselves, and game on.